Do you feel you were born for more? Get ready to uncover your God-given purpose so you can impact the world with your gifts, your talents, and your story. Welcome to our Purpose Power Summit. I'm your host, Mimika Cooney, and today's guest is going to talk to us about how to claim your purpose. Mike Flynn is a husband, father, CrossFitter, purpose evangelist, and second-generation entrepreneur. While helping people become the hero of their financial story, Mike discovered that the greatest crisis that many people face is not a financial one, but rather a lack of purpose. In 2016, Mike began a journey of self-discovery and learning when he created the Impact Entrepreneur Show, a highly rated podcast. Mike interviews incredible people who are using their platform to create game-changing impact in the lives of others. So welcome, Mike. Mike, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. This summit is huge, and I'm just really excited to be that purpose evangelist for people today.
Well, I'm excited too. And you happen to be our only gentleman on our lineup.
I know.
So like all these lovely ladies surrounding you, all our speakers, but we are, we know who we're talking to, but you come from a place of, this is your thing, right? When you and I chatted, you were like, you really are an evangelist when it comes to purpose. So I was like, oh, we know Mike definitely knows what to talk about.
Yes, I am very much into this. And it's funny because I'm on Facebook. I'm part of a dad's group, and there's like over almost 200 of us. And I posted the information about the summit in the dads group, and I got a message from a few of the guys saying, "Hey, you're a man amongst a bunch of awesome women," and I'm like, "That's why you got to invite your wives," So
exactly, yes, get the wives on, right? Because we
absolutely
know the heart of the home is the wife. If she can get her stuff together, get herself, feeling good about herself, then the husband it's all plain sailing for him, right?
Happy wifey, happy lifey. That's
exactly. So we are going to help us wonderful ladies get it together and really find our purpose and really tap into what we know that God has ordained us for. And you, I know, being a podcast host yourself, you know exactly about how stories and pulling out the information is so important. So before we get into the juicy bits and the actual actionable things we're going to share with you today, take us back to how this all started for you.
So I'm a second generation entrepreneur, and my main gig is as a financial advisor and part of our family firm. And we're not going to talk about financial planning or anything of that nature today, but it is something that's very important to what I do and how I provide for my family. But it's kind of something that I didn't ever imagine that I would do. When I was growing up, I swore that I would never join the family business. And so I actually have a degree in public relations and business. And I had done quite a bit of acting, musical theater, things of that nature. And I thought that I was going to be pursuing a career in the arts. And at one point, someone that I trusted and respected and admired said to me, if you do that, you're really going to suffer. You're going to struggle and you may never make it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I believe that whatever God originates, he orchestrates. So I won't say fortunately or unfortunately, actually, I got to correct myself. But I listened to that person. And even though I had experts in the musical theater and in the arts telling me that I was talented and had gifts and could succeed, I listened to someone who had no experience, but who I loved and respected tremendously. And I dropped all of that. And I pursued a degree in business and public relations. And I worked for a PR firm for a brief period of time. And then one day I'm like, you know what? After I got tired of selling Clorox bleach pens. That's what one of our largest clients was Clorox. And I was just like, I want to have a significant impact in the lives of others. And I'm not going to get there selling ice cream or bleach pens or trash bags. I got to do something else. And so I was walking on Battery Street in San Francisco one day, and I called my dad up and I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to give you the opportunity of a lifetime." And he said, "How much money do you need, son?" And I said, no money. I want to prove you right, because you always said that I would join the family business someday. And here I am. And so that was 2004. And it was like a rocket ship right off the bat, very successful. And in August of 2007, my wife and I closed escrow in California on our first home. We had 2 kids, and shortly thereafter, we would learn that we were pregnant with number 3. And in November of that year, I made $200 that month.
Wow.
And I knew that the winds were changing in the financial services world. Well, fast forward, and the financial crisis just crushed us, absolutely crushed us. And I went from being this incredibly self-confident, physically fit, optimistic person to being 250 pounds, incredibly depressed and pessimistic, and feeling like I had failed almost on every single level, because even though I had followed my own advice and had money in the bank, you know, to burn through in the case of a rainy day, well, I didn't anticipate a rainy day lasting for a year and a half. And so we basically went through financial ruin practically. We didn't go bankrupt or anything, but one day I was bending over to pick up my 1.5-year-old daughter's sippy cup, and my back gave out, and I was flat on the floor in excruciating pain. I thought I was actually having a heart attack or something. It was so painful. And my wife was not there. It was just me and my 2 daughters. And I couldn't get to the phone because I couldn't move. I was stranded on the stairs. And I asked my 3-year-old to go get me the phone so I can call her mother. And meanwhile, my other daughter's crying while she's watching Little Einsteins, not because daddy's on the ground, but because daddy hasn't picked up her sippy cup and given it to her yet.
Oh
And
dear.
so I couldn't get a hold of my wife. And so I had to call my mom, who lived 10 minutes away, and she had to come pick her 250-pound son off of the floor and take him to the emergency room. And that was literally the low point for me, both figuratively and physically. And it really began a journey of self-discovery, of meaning, of identifying what my purpose is, not was, but is, and how I can live into that every single day. And I think that we all have some story, some impact moment, that I refer to it, that kind of awakens
Mhm.
the giant within you, to quote Tony Robbins. We all have.
The come to Jesus moment.
Yes, the come to Jesus moment. We have, and it's a moment where that heavenly water, if you will, drops onto the soil, and suddenly um, the seeds of our purpose begin to break through the surface, and then we let them get crushed. And we can dive into that, because that's how one of the ways that I educate people on how to claim their purpose is avoiding the crush. So
Definitely. I mean, and what I think, is integral for us to sort of learn from your story is that I think it's number one, it's not uncommon, and I think it's happens a lot where we told this is what your life's going to be. You go to school, go to college, get a job, and this is what you need to be because you can make money, or this is what it makes physical, or it makes sense to do that, right? And
mhm,
we have this deep inside, this yearning within us that perhaps when we were a kid or when we were younger, and everyone keeps telling you, oh, you can't do it. And like you as well, I grew up in the arts, dance from when I was 3, and I wanted to be a ballerina when I grew up, but everyone said that's not a not a job that you get
yeah,
paid for. But there's some essence, I think we start to sort of chip away at our confidence, and the purpose slowly, as you say, gets crushed and pushed down.
mhm,
But eventually as adults, you come that tipping point where you feel like this internal frustration
yeah,
eventually just breaks out, that you literally feel like you want to scream. You cannot
right,
be somebody you're not. And wouldn't you say, like, you even mentioned how, being overweight, and it affected you mentally, physically, spiritually, and
oh,
emotionally.
yeah, 100%. And it's interesting, as you're talking, I'm thinking of a moment, after I had my back gave out. That was in 2009. And I really didn't start moving out of the financial crisis and recovering until like 2011. So I mean, it was a really difficult time. And I remember one night my wife and I got on our knees, literally on our knees, and we just said, okay, God, if financial ruin is the lesson that we need to learn, we're ready. Let's make it happen. We were stripped. We had let all of everything go. And the last thing to go was our ego, right?
Mm.
We had let go of the house. We had let go of a lot of material things. And the last thing I was holding on to was my ego because I was afraid of what other people would think, right? Here
Mm.
I am, this financial advisor going through this scenario. What would people think? And regardless of whether they were my clients, what would people think of financial failure at all? The reality is the number one thing that prevents us from taking action is not fear of failure. It's fear of what other people will think of us if we fail, right?
Right. So we kind of ruminated on something that could happen that perhaps doesn't actually end up happening. And we
Right.
make life decisions based on worrying what the neighbors are going to think, or in your case, your parents, right? I think a
Yeah.
lot of us have had this. We've had these expectations of our parents that they put on us, maybe unknowingly or unknowingly.
Mhm.
We create these stories in our head that we
Oh
don't
man,
point them.
you're getting you're this is so awesome because this is all about you're touching on some of the things that we need to address in order to be positioned to claim our purpose, to claim the purpose that God has instilled in us
Mhm.
from the day that we were born. So once you get rid of ego
Mm. And pride, right? Because that's
and
really,
pride,
it's the
right,
pride of not letting people see some skin and realize that, you're not
right,
perfect.
yeah.
I'm
Once
a
you get
recovering perfectionist. Like, I will
yeah,
admit it.
you know,
It's a work in
once
progress.
once you get rid of that, once you shed that, then you can actually step into believing that you are worthy of the beautiful creation that you are.
Mm.
And the word believe, the suffix part of that word leave is actually a German rooted word I recently learned, and it means love.
Ah, interesting.
And so when you believe, you love. So when you believe yourself, you are loving who you are created to be. And when you believe in others, you are loving them. So when somebody recently asked me, how do you know that your wife loves you? And I responded by saying, when I can tell that she believes in me. And
Mm.
because that is the ultimate form of love, because it means that we're letting go of some of our own the trappings of our own beliefs and our own selfishness because in order to you have to believe in something else, right? And so that's the first step. And I know that when we were talking on the phone in advance of this call, I started to tell you about King David and how King David is the ultimate example of stepping into one's purpose, and also at the same time the perfect example of what can happen when you step away from your purpose.
Yeah.
So if you're ready, I can dive into that.
Go for it. Well,
Okay.
you got some great tips, and we're going to dive into this. So take some notes if you're listening.
Yes. On
This
my
is really good.
podcast, I always say, bust out your pens and paper, take some notes, and brace for impact.
There you go. Take it
Yes.
away.
Yes. So King David, I love talking about King David as the archetype of an entrepreneur or anybody who is really focused on stepping into their purpose. So there's a few things that we have to identify first, real quick, so that we can relate. Number one, God has never failed us, never will fail us. We've all experienced challenges, and if we persevered, God has always shown up on the other end. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
Right.
Even though we don't
And
see it, when
even
we
though
look
we don't
back, we
see
do
it,
it.
but as one of my mentors who doesn't know he's my mentor, but he's a mentor, Andy Stanley, says that what God originates, he orchestrates, right? And so God is faithfulness and he cannot deny himself. So he will always be faithful. That's the first thing that we have to acknowledge. The second thing that we have to acknowledge is that we are born with God-given gifts and talents. And you just have to go back and think back in your life about the times that people have told you, hey, you're good at that. That comes so natural to you. Oh man, you make me feel so good when you're doing X, right? So those are little hints, okay? We also have to acknowledge that there are people that we're going to encounter in our lives that are naysayers, that don't want us to succeed, that want to hold us down because they're afraid of their own potential and afraid of what our success might look like on them, right?
Mm.
We have to recognize that while we have naysayers who are afraid of our success, we have actual people who are afraid of us failing because they actually do love us, and still we need to shed their armor, right?
Right. So kind of the expectations, right? If
Yeah, their
we
expectations.
disappoint them, then what
Yeah,
does it make them feel? Which is not our
yeah.
problem, it's their
Mm-hmm.
problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important, especially for women. Like if we take that on a lot, like we feel like, well, I don't want to disappoint my parents, or I don't want to disappoint my kids. Like if I'm not, the perfect mom, and and involved in every different club, and everyone thinks I've got it together. We need to kind of strip that down and realize
Yep.
that that is not reality. It's creating an immense amount of stress, and we can't continue that, right? So I love
Mm-hmm.
how you say strip the armor. So how would we do that?
Yeah. So first, you have to recognize that you and I, we share the same anointing as King David. Okay. That's step number one. We don't need Samuel to come up to us and say, "You're the king," right? When we are baptized, we are anointed priest, prophet, and king. Okay. We need to step into that and embrace that and acknowledge that. Okay. The first thing is that going back, so that's the first thing. The second thing is going back and recognizing the times that God's delivered us, that he has helped us through challenges. And in David's case, he would go out and he would hunt for the family. He would protect his sheep, and he would get faced by bears and lions. And he has said that God's delivered him from the paws of bears and the mouths of lions, right? And so we have to recognize and acknowledge and reflect. The word reflect literally means to bend back time or direct light or heat onto something. And so we need to reflect on those times where God has come through for us. Okay. So that was the second thing. The third thing is we know that we're going to deal with naysayers, that we all have naysayers, people that don't want us to succeed or don't believe that we can succeed. And so the perfect example here is when David ends up going, he's already found out that he's anointed king. The Israelites are now facing off with the Philistines, and David walks up to the battle line and his brothers are in the trenches, and his older brother looks up to him and says, "What are you doing here? Go deal with your little project. You're just here to watch the battle." And when I read that, I'm like, "Ooh, man, that resonates with me," because I'm
It
like,
must have
"Oh yeah."
stung, right? His ego,
I'm
like
like,
really?
"Oh yeah, oh yeah." First of all, you got the jealous brother who's telling his younger brother that you're just here to watch the battle. You're not capable. You don't have the skills or abilities we men do. We, successful ones do. The experienced ones do. And David said, "Oh yeah, watch this." So he goes up to King Saul and he says, "Hey, King Saul, I'll fight Goliath. I'll step up. Nobody else is doing it. I'll step up." King Saul's like, "Well, I guess somebody's got to do it." So he says, "Okay, what do you have? What can you do?" He's like, "Well, I've got this slingshot. I can use my slingshot, and it saved me from bears and lions, and God's delivered me, and He'll deliver me from Goliath."
I can
And
imagine his family, his brothers standing there either laughing their heads off or thinking this guy is a goner. Like
oh
seriously.
yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, he's probably both. Probably he's probably standing outside of that tent, and all of his brothers are going back and forth saying, "Oh, David is going to embarrass us in front of the king. How dare he?"
What are the
And
neighbors going to think?
yeah, what are the neighbors going to think? Or and at the same time, uh, Eliab, or however you say his name, Eliab, is probably thinking to himself, because jealousy exists amongst brothers and sisters. Okay, it really is a problem. I'm one of six, and so he's probably sitting there thinking, well, if David steps out and fails, what does that mean for me?
Mm.
So that thought probably entered his mind. But so he goes to King Saul, and King Saul says, "Fine, you can stand before Goliath and fight him, but you have to wear my armor." So King Saul takes his armor off and puts it on this 16-year-old kid. And David walks around that. Imagine that. Like, imagine right now, close your eyes and imagine that you are in this tent, and King Saul has just taken his armor off of him and put it on you, how awkward would that feel?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so uncomfortable, and you don't know how to move in it. And David's got to take this slingshot and fling that thing around, and he just knows that he's not going to be able to perform his unique ability. So what does he do? He sheds it. He takes the armor off.
Which is very brave, because a lot of us would have just not wanted to offend the king and said, okay, I'll do what you want me to do just because I want to keep the peace, right? Or I want to keep
Yes,
everybody happy. And then
absolutely.
sort of really put yourself in a dangerous position, because what I find in that moment is he followed his heart. He really
Hmm.
listened to what God was saying, which is
Hmm.
super brave.
Hmm. Super brave, courageous. The word courageous means heart,
Yeah.
and not only courageous, but he moved beyond courage into confidence. And confidence means with faith, right? And so he knew that God would not fail him. And if we have the same anointing and we know our unique gifts and talents, and we have the courage to shed other people's armor, then we can step forward in confidence.
Mm.
Now, here's the tricky part, though, okay? The hardest part of this is going to be identifying who the kings are in your life. Who's the
Right.
who the false kings are, because we serve one king, right? So who are the people that are lording over you and preventing you because from stepping into your purpose and claiming it? And they're doing that because for one of two reasons. They're either doing it because they're afraid of how your success will reflect on them, or they love you and they really are genuinely afraid of your failing, right? So you have to identify that, and you have to identify who those people are, and then you have to identify the stories that they've told you about yourself and that you've adopted and begun to believe. Can you imagine if David had believed that a slingshot and 5 smooth stones wouldn't do the job?
Right.
I mean, what ramifications would that have beyond the whole David versus Goliath thing? So then he might start thinking, well, geez, I guess these things are probably no good at hunting large animals. Maybe I'll fail. Imagine the other thing that's not in the Bible, but I was thinking about this the other day. So Saul says to David, "You can fight him," and he puts his armor on, and then he probably said to something to the effect of, "And you can have any of these weapons over here, like any modern day weapon, a big gigantic sword, all these shields, all of these, axes or whatever was available at that time. Any modern technology, he was readily available to David." But what did he select? He selected 5 smooth stones. And I think that that's important, okay? I think it's important because those stones existed before David existed.
Right. Okay. So the kind of were there already. It was a matter of him realizing they were for him and to pick them up.
And so when you think about that, so who created those stones, right?
Mm.
God. Who created us? God. Who knitted us in our mother's womb? God. So our purpose was with us from the day that we were conceived in our mother's womb. And we just need to have eyes to see the tools.
Right. And as
Uh,
well as the fact that not everybody else's tools are
Right.
good for you. And I think that's a huge thing, especially with women, is the comparison thing. It's always
Hmm.
comparing ourselves, our lack and our worthiness and
Hmm.
our abilities and our experience based on looking at somebody else's, you know, arsenal of weapons or tools and thinking that they need to fit us, but they don't.
No. And there's this great quote that by Theodore Roosevelt that says, comparison is the thief of all joy.
Yeah, that is
And
so true.
it's so true. It's so true. And then I was thinking about it the other day because, I spend quite a bit of time on social media and, as a podcaster, as you do as well. And I was thinking the other day, I'm like, gosh, there's probably a lot of people that and I find this on myself sometimes, that I admire others and I admire what they're doing, and I'm swiping through their stories and I'm liking their content. And then I go about my day and I don't do anything, right? And so then I started thinking, well, gosh, if comparison is the thief of all joy, then admiration is the thief of progress,
Right. That's a good one.
because admiration is not going to change your world. Only action will.
So instead of sitting there and thinking, oh, well, Susie Q has just got her perfect life because she's got X, Y, and Z, and thinking it would be nice to have that,
Yeah,
instead, kind of thinking that maybe if I should just take action with the small stones I already have in my disposal.
exactly. And those stones can compound. Your gifts can be compounded and multiplied, and the fruit from that can be significant. But we have to be courageous, shed the armor, and then when we do that, we can step forward in confidence and pick up those stones and execute our skills. And there's the other thing that prevents people from taking action is they're not asking themselves the right question.
Right. So what would that be then?
What is at stake?
Hmm.
And the answer is everything. Because if we believe that we're created by a God who loves us, then and created us with a purpose, and if we're not living intentionally in that purpose and claiming it, then everything is at stake. All of our relationships. And there's a very reliable statistic I heard once that one of my mentors shared with me, and that is that 2 out of 2 people are going to die someday. Okay? We're all going to die. All right?
It's
Let's just be
inevitable.
let's just be really
Nobody gets
blunt,
out. Yeah, nobody gets out of this alive.
Right. We're all going to die, and every asset that you own or hope to own someday will one day be owned by someone else. Okay? So we're going to die, and everything that we own is going to be owned by somebody else someday. So what do we have? We have the confidence in what the purpose is that God's given us, and we need to step into that. And we need to ask ourselves, what's at stake? And the reality is that in David's case, sure, there was a risk that he could die, okay, standing before Goliath. But the risk of the alternative of him not stepping forward was even greater, because the whole Israelite legacy was on the line here. And so he stepped forward knowing full well that, and with confidence, that God would deliver him, but that he knew that Israel was at stake, that his legacy was at stake, that his family's legacy was at stake. Here's the really cool kind of modern historian thing, that if Goliath is the personification of fear, right? Of what we think of as fear, right? So most modern historians today think that Goliath was this 9-foot giant who was actually, he was 9 feet tall because he had a disorder, a genetic disorder that actually made him blind.
Oh,
And so,
right. I never thought of that.
yeah, and so he was really more of a figurehead than anything else. The Philistines would put him out there as an intimidation tactic, and he was actually not capable of doing anything, which is one of the reasons why David was able to nail him down, right? So if our fear can't see us, then why aren't we taking action? If fear is something that is just in our head, what's at stake? What will you gain by taking action? What might you lose by taking action? And the reality is that for most people, the only thing that we would lose by taking action is money.
Right. And that's replaceable. We can always get more of that.
You can always get more of that. Even if you can, like, look at the number of people, very successful people, that have had multiple bankruptcies. So if there's people on this summit right now that are in financial distress, that have had bankruptcy, that have had a short sale of their home, that are going through any sort of financial stress, let it go. Do not let that be an anchor right now. You don't need that to be an anchor. You don't need that to prevent you from stepping into who you are created to be. Let it go. And
Right.
the reason that's really important is because when we deviate from our purpose. So Dave, let's keep with David for a second. So David, he wins this battle, right? And he's this great king. And as he gets into his purpose and in his kingship, he ends up kind of like deferring and delegating a little bit of his authority to other people, right? And sometimes when we hit certain levels of success, we start, delegating, right? Well, here's what happens when we step out of our core purpose, our core values, our core gifts, and we let other people fight our battles for us. What happens is you end up staying at home, admiring a bathing woman on a house across the way,
Getting tempted instead of doing what he's meant to be doing.
having an affair, killing the lady's husband, and then your whole legacy goes into shambles, right? But in those times, the king was always on the battlefield.
Mm. So his
It's
error wasn't in what he did, it's what he didn't do.
it's what he didn't do.
Right.
It's what he didn't do. And it's really, really important that we don't miss that. It's if you have a purpose, you were created for a purpose. If you let other people fight those battles for you, that is when all of that stress, all of those relationships, everything is going to be out of alignment and you're going to feel frustrated. You might not know why exactly, but that is why. It's because you're not living in the way that you were created to live, with the purpose that you were created with. I often say that people are walking around like a souvenir coffee mug with pens in it. I got one right here.
Oh, yeah.
Literally. And this is a very frustrated coffee mug because it's doing something but not necessarily the right thing.
Right.
And too many people in life are walking around just like this coffee cup. And to include myself, and I have to remind myself on a regular basis what I am called to do and who I am called to be, because I have 38 years of other people's stories still that I'm peeling off of me.
Right. I mean, and I think we take it on as well from what the expectations and also depending on where we are in life. But I know even from whether you're young, middle age or older, there will always be this internal turmoil if you're not really living out your purpose. And I know purpose can sound very ethereal, but it really is that core of who you are, because you can see the symptoms, right? People walking around depressed, angry, frustrated. They ruin their relationships. They ruin all the opportunities they come. Or self-sabotage is a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because really what it is at the core of it, we really stripped away everything and got down to the root cause. It really is a frustration of the lack of purpose of not being who we are meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Walking, it's almost like, going to a store and somebody says to you, here's a free credit card, go buy whatever you want. And you just put the credit card in your pocket and you just window shop.
Right.
You've just been given the whole, so you can buy whatever you want and you're not doing anything with it.
Yeah. I think oftentimes people confuse potential and purpose. Okay.
Well, that's a good one. What would you say is the difference then? How would you identify the difference?
Purpose is meant to facilitate something, right?
Hmm.
So if you think about money, it facilitates a transaction. If you think about a mug, its purpose is to hold tea, right? Or water or whiskey or whatever, and it's meant to carry something from one place to another, right? And so my purpose is to help facilitate other people identifying and claiming who they were created to be. So I'm taking someone from where they are to where they should be. Not could be, but should be, right? And potential is almost a precursor to recognizing your purpose. So potential is really just energy that's stored up and capped and has yet to be tapped, right? And so a lot of our potential and our purpose gets shoved down because other people aren't allowing us to facilitate who we were created to be. And that potential is when it's released, is what drives energy into our ability to fulfill our purpose. Does that make
Right. So
sense?
yeah,
Kind of.
and so definitely you need both to be able to know. Like people say, oh, if you think about you say the word potential, a lot of us think of maybe say child prodigies, music or arts or whatever. Oh, they've got a lot of potential. You know that one day they might step into doing what they were born to be. And you see this glimmer of hope. And unfortunately, my husband and I have run businesses for 20 years, and we always say potential is a swear word because
Uh-huh.
everybody says this has got a potentially a great idea, but unless you put action into it,
Right.
it's pretty much
Uh,
useless.
unless you put action, it's just potential,
Exactly. It's just like a
right?
fizzy bottle, a fizzy can that's going to sit there. Unless you open the cap, it's kind of nobody's drinking it. It's no use to anybody.
Yeah, but you just mentioned something that's really important too, and that is that throughout our life, we have people say to us, "Gosh, that person has so much potential." And then we kind of move along without our day without like teasing that string out. Like, what do you mean? Tell me more. What do you see in me? You know, because it's not obvious to this coffee mug that it's a coffee mug. It's obvious to you and I that it is, but not to the coffee mug. It doesn't know that it's a coffee mug, but similarly, you and I, the reason why God puts us in relationship with other people is to help each other draw out our purpose and to tap into that potential. And we don't allow ourselves to share with people our hopes, our dreams, and our fears again because we're afraid of what they might think.
Mhm.
Who am I to have a dream?
Yeah.
You know, like I just interviewed this very successful CrossFit athlete recently, and she came from as she put it, a dirt poor family. And as she began to become more and more successful, she ended up having to shed a lot of her relationships because those people just didn't like, who are you to be successful?
Mm.
Right.
It's like the lobster syndrome, right? Nobody wants the lobster to get out. They'll pull each other down if you stick
Yes.
around.
Yeah. And you have to be very conscious of who you allow in, who the critics are. You're always going to have critics in your life, and you have to decide how you're going to manage them. It's one thing if they're family, because family is forever, right? But it's another thing if they're just a friend, right? If they're a really good friend, then you should have the freedom to tell them, hey, listen, this just isn't the way that you're talking to me, is not really helpful and uplifting and building my character up. It's tearing me down. It's making me feel little. And if we share the same beliefs and values, let's build each other up. Let's help each other breathe life into our dreams, inspire each other. The word inspire means to breathe life into something. So let's be inspiration for each other. Words of hope and encouragement. Let's not be discouragers and rip things apart, right? The words that we use with each other, and as we're moving on in our purpose and stepping into who we're created to be. One of my mentors is a guy named Kevin Hall, and he wrote a phenomenal book called Aspire, Discover Your Life's Purpose Through the Power of Words. And the words that we use with each other and with ourselves are incredibly important because words have meaning. Words have power, and they can either build up or they can tear down. And so, when you're going through, here's just a few of my favorite words. Okay. One word, encourage means to add to the heart. Discourage means to rip apart the heart, right? So when you're feeling discouraged in this journey, which you will, you need to ask yourself, why am I feeling discouraged? Am I feeling discouraged because I don't have money in the bank? Am I feeling discouraged because my relationships aren't where they should be? Another one of my favorite words is passion, right? It's the most overused
Yeah,
word in the
cliche.
entrepreneurial, right? It's so
You
cliche.
just need passion and everything will flow. I'm like,
Right.
oh, not really.
Yeah. Until you understand passion in the proper context, it really doesn't have any meaning. Because you know what the word passion literally means? The willingness to sacrifice.
Really,
That's
which actually doesn't have any bearing on what the context in which we use it.
no, like I'm so passionate about this. Oh, really? You're willing to sacrifice that thing? No, it's actually the first time that the origin of the word passion was used was in the Passion of Christ.
Right.
The the willingness to sacrifice or suffer for something, right? And so when you are analyzing all of the opportunities that we get every day, oh, this idea, that idea, ask yourself, am I willing to suffer for that?
Mm.
There's going to be a cost to every decision that we make. You know, when you pursue something, there are going to be short-term costs, there's going to be long-term costs, and you have to identify which ones that you're willing to suffer for. Because when you step onto that entrepreneurial path and you step into your purpose, there are going to be people who are going to be pulling at you and trying to prevent you from moving forward. And you have to ask yourself, am I willing to suffer for that relationship, or do I need to let it go?
Right. So definitely some really deep thought points to ponder on, because it is a lot of the time is like we say, we want to claim your purpose, and what we do is we have these ideas in our head, but unless we have those decisions, and really what we're saying is, what's the worst that could happen when you're
Hmm.
coming to that decision, the edge of that cliff, like before you're about to jump off and dive into the water for the first time? It's like, well, what's the worst that could happen, right? If I tried this,
Yeah.
if I fail, like, I'm an active figure skater, and I know if I had to allow every time I fall to stop me and say, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I got myself hurt and I got a big bruise and I'm not going to do it. I wouldn't learn anything. But
Yeah.
it's about getting up again, right? And just saying, even though I fail, doesn't matter. I'm going to just keep doing it again. And often, wouldn't you say as well, the discovery of your purpose can sometimes be like trying a whole lot of different things until something fits?
Yes, absolutely. You got to say yes to things. What's going to happen is, as you go through this journey, you're going to see clues. And one of the things I tell people to do is to go back and in some reflection time, and go back in their life and identify those things in their timeline where people said, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that, you should do this, you're a natural at that. And start testing those things. If it's singing, if it's acting, if it's writing, if it's a combination of all of those things together, you know, and just start trying things. And it's really important, because when you find your thing, and guess what, by the way, your purpose may not be becoming a super successful mega entrepreneur. Your purpose may just be becoming the best dad that you could possibly be, or the best mom, or the best wife or husband, or the best whatever in that moment, right? There's freedom in that. When you go through this process, there's freedom that you can now embrace, and own it, right?
Mm.
And that's going to be a really powerful thing. But yes, go through and say yes to a bunch of things. So, and the other reason that's important is because you just mentioned you're a figure skater, right? And I've seen some pictures of you, and I think you're pretty good. You've been
Thank
doing it for a long time, and pretty talented. But imagine how successful. Do you play any other sports before I ask this question?
Well, I've been a dancer. I've always been involved in the arts. So for me, I've been a dancer learning to skate, which is a totally different mindset from being learning. So I never learned to skate until I was 33.
Okay.
But I've done other different types of sports and tried things along horse riding. And I'm from South Africa. We tried netball, which is like another version of basketball. So we do try things.
Yeah.
But I had to try them to
What was the
realize
most awkward? What was the most awkward? What sport was it that you felt the most awkward?
gymnastics. My legs
Ju-
were way too long.
Okay.
I was not strong enough to get those flippies. But yeah, embarrassing.
That's really important. Okay. That is really, really important. And people that are listening right now need to listen here, because this is a perfect example. Sports, my wife criticizes me sometimes because I use analogies a lot, um, but sports is a really great way to think about life. Sport imitates life. And if you're a figure skater and you're doing really well, or you're a dancer or whatever it is, and you just kind of get, it just comes naturally to you. You're doing it, right? And then you go and do gymnastics, and you're like flailing around and super awkward, right?
Yeah, it's a hot mess.
Well, sometimes our lives are like that, right? And so you got to make sure that you're in the right position, right? So if you're another analogy that somebody gave to me recently on the podcast is, I'm a baseball fan, and the fourth batter in the lineup is typically the cleanup hitter, and that's the person that is supposed to clean all the bases up, right? Hit the home run out of the park. And it's a strategic position, right? And the first batter is there just to get on base, right? To hit a ground ball. Well, what would happen to the whole game of baseball if you switched those two players? You would have two frustrated players and a frustrated coach, because all three of those people would not be fulfilling who they were created to be. Now, so examine your relationships, examine where you are in your work and your career, and identify whether the ones that are out of position, out of alignment.
Mm.
And speaking of alignment, the most important relationship that we can have is with our spouse, right? And so as we are pursuing our visions, our dreams, our hopes, our purpose, it is absolutely critical that we bring our spouses on board and get them involved early on in communicating about what our hopes, dreams, fears, aspirations are, and so that we can together create one unified vision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way that through this process, if you're both involved, because there will be ups and downs, there will be challenges, you will have setbacks, but together, when you're in alignment, you're like a laser, right? You can get through anything.
And it affects the whole family dynamics too, especially if you've got kids, right? If mom and dad are getting on and, there's support in both ways. And, that's great. But what would you say to those families or those women who maybe hear listen to this, maybe they feel like their spouse doesn't support them? What advice would you give them?
I would say if they want to mirror the actions that they want. Okay. So if they want to feel supported by their spouse, right? I would say just to mirror how they would want to feel. So, if they want to feel supported by their spouse, maybe start using some of the language that they want to receive with their spouse, if that makes sense. So, if you want to feel encouraged in your dreams, maybe encourage your husband and talk about his dreams. And he's going to be like, who are you? And what have you done with my wife? And, and just start talking about how you believe in him,
Yeah.
honestly, like I will tell you from one husband to a bunch of wives that are listening, that our number one fear is you not believing in us.
Right. So a man, he's got to have his woman on board. She's got to really believe in him and support him and feel, because he's putting on the brave face, but he still needs to have those affirmations. He still needs to have that support,
Yes.
right?
And I know that your number one fear is us not believing in you and not encouraging your skills and talents.
Right. So
And
it's kind of like a conversation that we kind
yeah,
of need to sit down and say, okay,
it
time we
needs to
actually talk
happen.
about this.
You got to have conversation and communication. There's no easy way around it. There's there's really no easy way around it, but you can passively do it by using language and acting the way that you want, and see if there's some reciprocity that begins to happen. But the fastest way to do it is through flat out communication. Listen,
Right.
I have hopes and dreams for us, for our future. I believe that this is who I'm created to be and what I'm supposed to do, and begin creating that picture. But what he is going to ask you when you start telling him these things are two things: why and how. So I would, keep things pretty close to the chest until you have some of those whys and hows answered. You don't need to have all of them, but you need to have some of them. I just went through this with my wife. Uh, I brought her online with my vision for the future and what I'm creating. And that was one of my major goals for 2018, was to create a pitch. I pitched my wife on my idea, and I got her buy-in, and we are in alignment. And she knows that, she believes that this is what God is calling us to do, and we're pursuing it together. It's one, you can be successful by yourself probably, but wouldn't it be much more fun being successful together? Yeah,
Exactly. Well, two chords are much harder to break than one, right? And you can feel like
absolutely.
you can do
Ooh,
more, you can reach
yeah.
more when you're
Guess
actually in
guess
alignment.
what? Guess what we all have though.
And
Guess what we all have. We have a three-stranded cord.
exactly. God in the center, right? That's what He designed us for, to have Him in the center and us together, working together. And really, we become unstoppable, and then we become a power
Yes,
family that we can really do a lot. But
absolutely.
we've covered so much information, and I know everyone's probably like, "Wow, how do we take this a little further?" But part of the summit is that our speakers are kindly donating some really awesome gifts. And Mike, you've donated your clarity scorecard, which is something I know that everybody's going to wonder, like, how do I get that clarity to find my purpose? So tell everybody about that.
Sure. So it's a really cool scorecard that I created where you can use to assess kind of where you are and where you want to go. And so there's going to be 10 different areas. You've got your superpower, I call it your superpower, your spiritual domain, your emotional domain, intellectual, your physical, recreational, volunteer, romantic, your social, and your professional, right? And then in each of those domains, there's going to be 4 statements. And then above those 4 statements is a sliding scale 1 to 12. And you're going to score yourself on how much you identify with those statements. And what I want you to do is to think back to 6 months or a year ago and look at the assessment uh, from that reflection, score yourself then fast forward to the present, score yourself again so you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of how the scoring system works. And there's an explanation there also. And then in 6 months, come back and score yourself again. This is a living document. You can update it all the time, regularly. It's yours, and it's an Excel file, and you can use this as a tool to measure your progress as you gain clarity.
And that's important. I think once you have clarity, it makes your how and your why a lot more visible. It doesn't become this, well, I really one day I want to do this. And you don't feel like it has a never ending cycle. You're actually putting action in there,
Hmm.
putting us, and then sometimes it's almost like taking a bird's eye view, right? Looking at it like, oh, actually it's not as bad as I thought it was, or
Yeah,
actually I'm actually closer than I thought it would be, or
right.
this may be not as bad idea as I thought. So I think by taking action, and that's part of what we're doing the summit for, is to help you take that action, activate yourself so you can claim your purpose. It doesn't become something in the air, it's something you can ground and put those steps in. So definitely go to mimikacooney.com and click on the summit tab and make sure you sign up for that, our list. You'll get a download of all our 20 speakers who have provided their content. And when you fill it out, you get some feedback on an aha moment. Reach out to Mike, let us know what you've learned from that. We would love to share in your successes and help you celebrate along your way, because as you said, we can't do life alone. We need to be doing this, as that's what we call the body of Christ. We're not
That's
the
right.
hand or the foot or the elbow. We don't live and breathe on our own. We need to really have that connection. So make sure
Hmm.
you go and do that. But I know we could talk all night, but we definitely, want people to know how to get in touch with you. So Mike, tell everybody, what's the best place to find you online?
Yeah, so I am pretty active on Instagram at the Impact Mike. I'm also on Facebook at the Impact Mike. I've got a Facebook page for the podcast there, the Impact Entrepreneur Show, which is also, if you go to Instagram and you click on the link in the bio, it will give you all of the different areas that you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and all of that stuff. So um, Instagram is kind of becoming my main hub.
You kind of like to hang out. Exactly. Well,
Yes.
definitely reach out to Mark and make sure you connect with him online and tell him you saw on the summit. As I said, keep the feedback going. I love to always hear back from guests and to hear back from our listeners and our audience, to actually see like what they've gained from this, which is why
Yes.
put
I'm
this
so
in.
excited.
It's going to be like
I'm
awesome.
so excited. And it was, we both wore the same color shirt today.
Exactly. I
So,
mean, like it was all
you
meant
know.
to be, right? And even the background, your photo in the background is also
Yes.
all there. So we're
Yes,
ready to grow
absolutely.
something and help you on your purpose. But if you've enjoyed what Mike had to say today, make sure to share it with your friends. Click the links under the video. If you're listening online, make sure to go and share it with someone. Forward the email. go and click and sign up, because I'm sure you know somebody who needs to hear this today, and you might even need to hear this again. So make sure you actually bookmark it too. But we have all the links in the show notes below the video where you can go and subscribe and join us. So I've got to say thanks again, Mike, for joining me. I so appreciate you taking the time out to share your great stories and of inspiration. And I'm definitely going to be listening to your podcast more often. I need to put it on speed dial.
Oh, thank you so much. It was very much an honor to be included. And I just want all the people that are listening to know that I believe in you. You know, I believe in you because we are created by the same incredible God. And I believe that we each can have and do more than we can possibly think, ask, or imagine. And it's time. Right now, it's time to step into that belief and to live a life of purpose on purpose.
Exactly. Well, I couldn't have said it any better than myself. So thanks, guys, for watching. I got to say thanks, Mike, again. And, definitely keep in touch. We'd love to hear this feedback. And I know this is something, by taking action, you're going to feel so much better about yourself. The light bulb moments will come. Go and do the clarity scorecard and, start taking those steps towards action. Just baby steps. That's all you need. So thanks again, Mike. And thanks for everyone for listening. Until next time, take care.
Yes.
Become a partner and join the Mimika TV family today.